Well, hi everybody, it's Rusty here again, and today I want to talk about what happens if you're not hiking on one of the big three trails. You know, the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, the Continental Divide Trail, and to a lesser extent, the American Discovery Trail. Those are the long ones in the United States. They get the press. But what's going to happen, like, for example, for me, when I'm done with the Appalachian Trail, done section hiking it, I'm not in the family situation, and maybe you aren't either, where I could just take off to the West Coast for a 5 or 6 month hike to through hike the Pacific Crest Trail. I'd love to do it, but it's just not in the cards, and I owe it to my family to not even think of going off and doing that. But does that mean that I'm done with long distance hiking when I'm done with the Appalachian Trail? Well, there are lots of alternatives, and today I'm going to talk about one of them, and that's the New England National Scenic Trail. So stay tuned. So like I said in the introduction, what can we do after we're done with, say, something like the Appalachian Trail? I'm just not in a social and family situation where I can go and do one of the other major trails in the United States. But if you go to Wikipedia and type in list of long distance trails in the United States, and I'll put a clickable link in the description for this, comes up with a list that looks like this, and you'll find that there are a ton of long distance hiking trails, and you can sort this by name, you can sort it by distance, and I'm sure you can find something near you. So if you're in a situation where just a through hike of one of the major trails or doing lashes is just not something that you would enjoy, maybe, or something that you can do either physically or because of your family situation, take a look at this list. So I'm going to look today at the New England National Scenic Trail, or New England Scenic National Trail, whichever it is. It's usually called the New England Trail, and it starts at the Atlantic Ocean on the Connecticut on Long Island Sound, and it heads north and it goes through Connecticut and Massachusetts, and it ends on the Massachusetts-New Hampshire border. It ends, but you could just continue on that same physical trail when you're on the Metacomet-Monadnock Trail, which actually starts at the border of Connecticut and Massachusetts and follows the New England Trail. They overlap, kind of like the way highway routes often do. I believe there's one spot in Massachusetts where they diverge for a few miles, but basically following the New England Trail, once you get into Massachusetts, you're following the Metacomet-Monadnock Trail. You can get all the way up to Mount Monadnock. From there, you could actually take the Monadnock Sunapee Greenway, and you could actually get up to Mount Sunapee. So this is what I call a hybrid trail. It's not fully suitable for overnight hikes in all its parts, especially down in Connecticut. So let's look at just the New England. Well, it actually goes up to Mount Monadnock here on this schematic, but here's where the shelters are, and I'm considering about somewhere around 14 or 15 miles a day to be a reasonable day's hike. And you can see that there are stretches here where for 4 days, you've got no place to stay overnight. Even the guidebooks say there is no overnight camping in these areas. Stealth camping is not allowed. A lot of it's on private property, so you've got to find a place off trail. I fortunately live close enough to the New England Trail I could actually walk to it from my house. I'd have to bring a water bottle with me or something, but it wouldn't be too far to walk to it from my house. I go up there all the time to walk my dog, driving up there, of course. And you can divide the New England Trail. Really, the logical thing was to say, well, everything Connecticut and everything Massachusetts, but really there's a physical barrier there, and that's the Connecticut River. And the trail kind of has a discontinuity there. There's no clean way to get across the Connecticut River. The guidebooks even suggest, ask a fisherman or something to see if you can bum a ride across. That's not a dependable way of getting across. So I think of it as south of the Connecticut River, north of the Connecticut River. And after you get a few days north of the Connecticut River, then you start to get to a section of trail where you can do overnight hiking. And that's everything from, some starting point somewhere south of the Wendell State Forest all the way up, probably all the way up to Mount Sunapee. I didn't show it on here, but that's, I think, about a a little bit more than a 100-mile stretch, so a little bit more than a week. So that's a goal that I can have. Like I said, I can't go out to the Pacific Crest Trail and leave my family for 5 or 6 months. Just not in the cards. I think I might physically be able to do it, but socially and for family obligations, it's not something that I'm ever going to attempt. So let's take a look at the trail. So in the next sections, we're going to look at about a 20-mile section close to my house, just to show you the variety of what's out there for the New England Trail. So you can go back to that list, whatever part of the country you live in, if you live in the United States, and I'm sure there's similar lists for Europe and in other places. Choose your own adventure. That's what I'm talking about doing. Just find something. I'm goal-oriented. I want to have a thing that I can complete. It's fantastic if you can go out and say, hey, I'm just going to hike every day and enjoy it. And that is actually great, and I envy people who do that. I kind of need some kind of goal. Like I've done 1,600 miles, a little bit more of the Appalachian Trail. I've got 575 left to do. That's a goal in my mind, and that's what keeps me motivated to keep going out there and getting it done. So I'm designing actually this next goal that I'm going to have, which is going to meet my family obligations by keeping me closer to home, and that is to section and day hike the southern part of the New England Trail, and then when I get up to northern Massachusetts, kind of do an extended section hike over many days, going from northern Massachusetts all the way up to Mount Sunapee in New Hampshire. So let's take a look at some of the things that are out there on the New England Trail. So all what I'm going to show you now is from a 20-mile stretch of the trail, from about 10 miles south of the Connecticut River to about 10 miles north of the Connecticut River. My point is to show you all the interesting sights along the way. This is a very short stretch of trail, but I think it's typical of the New England Trail. You can see the Mount Tom Ridge from my neighborhood here, and the steep cliffs that are actually below the trail. In other words, the trail goes along the ridge up there. So we're going to start on the south side of the Connecticut River with the Mount Tom Reservation, going by the Whiting Reservoir at the start of the trip. This is from the nearest trailhead to the south of Mount Tom. It's a steep but short climb from that trailhead south of the summit. And when we get to the top, we find that there's a Christmas star mounted at the peak that shines facing north during the Christmas season. And it was kept lit in the evenings sort of as a beacon of hope for us during the worst parts of the pandemic in 2021. We can continue along the ridge, get great views of East Hampton and Northampton, Massachusetts. And then along the way, we can take a short side trip within the Mount Tom Reservation to the Bray Tower. Though if we just stay on the trail, we'll come to the Goat Peak Tower, which is actually pretty close to the Bray Tower. Crazy Boonies and I recently hiked up there to take in the view, and here we can look ahead to the other side of the river and see the Mount Holyoke Summit House and Skinner State Park on the other side of the river, which we'll look at shortly. Continuing on past the Goat Peak Tower, we come to the Aerie House ruins. Now, this was a popular getaway spot in the late 1800s. Unfortunately, it burned down in the ground in 1901, and it was never rebuilt. The owner was kind of stingy and was underinsured, and I guess he was burning something up there, and unfortunately he lost it all. So this is all that's left to it. I've been up there a number of times. On the way down, we can see the Oxbow. That's a horseshoe-shaped lake that was originally part of the Connecticut River before Mother Nature decided to reroute the river in a straighter line. As we get down to the Mount Tom North Trailhead Park coming off the ridge here, we can actually come across some educational signage that tells us exactly how that was formed. So when we come to this Trailhead Park, this was recently opened. The trail was actually relocated in a very minor way, as it turns out. I found where the old trail and the new trail split. The old trail used to go just through some side streets and kind of uninteresting down to Route 5 along the Connecticut River. And this relocation just brings us through this nice park. The city of East Hampton and a bunch of other organizations have joined together to put together this nice park. It is accessible for people who can't hike but still want to get out and enjoy nature, and it's just a nice break at the end of the hike, because this really is coming up to the Connecticut River. This really is the last part of like your journey until you can get to the other side of the river. So that's the Mount Tom area. So next we're going to look at Skinner Park. One of the most interesting things we'll get to, the first interesting thing we'll get to when we start to head north of the Connecticut River, is the Summit House on Mount Holyoke in the Skinner Park Reservation. So here we show coming up to it. Unfortunately, when I was up there, parts of it were closed. They're doing some renovations, but this also was a very popular spot throughout the 1800s. This has burned down several times, I believe, or been blown away by a hurricane or something. It's very exposed up there. But interestingly, it is still up there and is more of a museum sort of thing. When it's open, you can get in there and see a bit of the history of the Summit House. I have actually been to the top, which is not very high anymore, but there's a small room at the top that I've in the past have been able to climb up to. Moving along the ridge, get spectacular views of Northampton and East Hampton. And we come across this memorial, very similar, reminded me of the Audie Murphy memorial down in Virginia. This is a memorial to some aviators during World War II were flying out of the nearby Air Force Base and crashed on the side of the mountain. Again, continuing on, we can really see some really nice views of the surrounding area. We can see UMass Amherst off to the, I guess it's northeast. On a clear day, if we know where to look for it, we can actually see Mount Monadnock, which is the terminal point of the Metacomet-Monadnock Trail, though, as I've said, you can continue on from Mount Monadnock and get to Mount Sunapee and probably well beyond. I've only planned to get to Mount Sunapee. So that's the Skinner Park area. And next we're going to take a look, we're going to go a little farther trail north. We're actually traveling east at this point. This whole range is a east-west sort of range, very rare actually. Most of the ranges are north-south or northeast-southwest sort of things, but this is actually pretty much a east-west ridge or set of ridges. And we're going to go on next to the other side of what's called the Seven Sisters Ridge, and we're going to go up Mount Norwottuck or Norwottuck. I'm not quite sure. I've heard it pronounced both ways. I've always called it Norwottuck. And we get up there and you can see, again, nice views, but we go beyond the peak of Mount, I'll call it Norwottuck, and we come to a very interesting section of trail which houses what's called the Horse Caves. And I often see the phrase, the Horse Caves of Revolutionary War days. And that phrase has been sitting in pamphlets for a good 50 years now. I first read it in the 1970s in an old Metacomet-Monadnock Trail guidebook. And that phrase, the Horse Caves of Revolutionary War times, really carries no real meaning just looking at that in isolation. I mean, of course, these are caves. They've been there for, probably millions of years, not just since the Revolution. But I dug a little deeper, and the story is that it's believed that during the Shays' Rebellion that these caves were used to hide supplies. Why horse caves? Not quite sure. Maybe it was feed for the horses that they were using at the time. But it's an interesting little area. You come between the cracks if you're headed north. A crack between two large, which probably at one time was one boulder, and there's a crack between it now. And you squeeze through that. And once you've gotten through that, all these little caves, they say you can explore them. To be honest, there's not a lot to explore there, but if you're interested in geology, I'm sure this is an interesting area. So that's the end of our quick little 20-mile stretch
of the New England Trail.
So in summary, this little short section of trail, it's only, like I said, it's maybe a 20-mile section right near my house, but it just gives you the idea, you don't have to go way out into the backwoods of Maine or into the Rocky Mountains to have interesting things and to really feel that, even though from the Mount Tom Ridge you can see all the surrounding towns the whole way, you're still getting up there and you're still enjoying being out in nature and seeing interesting stuff. So this is what I'd like you to take away from this, is that, don't be always locked into, like I have in the past been locked into, well, there's the 3 major trails, north-south trails in the United States, and those are the ones I want to do. There is plenty of other hiking out there all over the world of interesting and wonderful hikes that you can get out there and enjoy. So thanks for listening.